My name is Barbara Jones. I'm 66 years old and have lived my entire life in Portland, Oregon. I lost my husband too soon in an accident on I-5 when our son Daniel was still 7 years old. Since then, I have been a mother, a father, consolation, and ground. I worked as a seamstress downtown, sold pies at markets on Sundays, and turned every penny into a decent home. But tell me something. What would you do if the woman your son chose to marry treated you like deadweight? If it erased you from the photos, from the decisions of the family? Can you imagine being pushed out of your own story by someone you welcomed with a plate of food and a hug? I know you came here because you also feel that something is not right. Maybe you've experienced something similar, or know someone who was humiliated inside their own home. Life has these ironies. Who gave the most? He is the one who ends up with the most left. But today, I'm going to tell you how 2 words changed everything. Like a silent woman, made of scars and faith, she turned the tables without shouting, because there is silence that weighs more than screaming. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. Not return starts with a shout. Sometimes it arrives with the smell of apple pie coming out of the oven and a notification on your cell phone. It was on such a simple, ordinary afternoon that my eyes stopped on a photo. My son, my daughter-in-law, and her mother-in-law, sitting on my couch, with the caption written in small print, but which tore me inside. Well, the family that really matters. I looked at it as if being slapped in silence, and I answered with 2 words. 2 words they carried all the years I lived for them. Good luck. An hour later, the phone rang, and there began the end of the lie. But to understand how I got to this point, sitting alone with trembling hands and soul in pieces, you need to come back with me, to go back to when everything was love and promise. If this story has already touched any of your wounds, if you have also been left aside by those who helped the most, support me with your like, with your subscription here on the channel. This, for me, is not a number. It's a hug. Because telling this is not easy. But with you here, I feel less alone. I was only 18 years old when I found out I was pregnant with Daniel. His father disappeared as soon as he found out, and I don't blame him anymore. I blamed it for years. Yes, but today I understand that some people just don't have the courage for real life. At that time, I was still living with my mother in East Portland, and shame weighed more heavily on me than my body. I remember that my mother didn't say anything to me. He just looked at me, gave me a blanket, and said, "Wow, now you're going to have to learn to be strong in silence." And that's what I did. In the morning, I washed sheets at a communal laundromat on Belmont Street. In the evenings, I worked a shift at the bakery on C. Hawthorne Bill, the same bakery that later let me sell my pies on Sundays. I slept little, Maurice, ate what was left, and every penny I saved was with my son's name in my head. I used to talk to myself while doing the laundry. Why, go study, Daniel. It's going to be someone in this life. The first apartment I bought was with the help of the church program. An old cubicle with mold on the windows. But mine, I renovated it with my own hands. I learned how to apply spackle and paint walls on YouTube. I changed the kitchen sink by myself, and every nail I hit that wall was through him. Over time, I was able to buy another property, a small house that I rented to a widowed lady. I never increased the value, even when everything became more expensive. Later, I bought a second car, a used Corolla that only worked with patience and skill, but took my son to school and came back with me from the fair. Every achievement of mine came from pain, sweat, and faith. Daniel grew up seeing this. I saw myself coming back from the street with my hands full of bags and my feet hurting, but never complaining. He knew I was doing everything for him. On Sundays, I made sure to cook our roast chicken with corn and mash, and he would say, "Well, Mommy, one day it'll give you a giant house." I smiled. I smiled. I didn't even need to. That blue wooden house that I renovated with so much love was already my castle. My neighborhood respected me. I was that woman who took care of her nephews when her sister had depression, who took soup to the sick neighbor in the dead of winter, who gave a ride to the lady from the church. He didn't do it out of vanity. He did it because he thought it was right. I thought it was beautiful. I never had to scream to be heard. But what I didn't imagine, it's just that the cry I never gave would turn against me, that the silence that has always protected me would become my greatest enemy. Sometimes I find myself remembering little Daniel, running with dirty feet across the porch. Young Mommy, you, the stars, can't it out? Look at this. As if everything he discovered in the world only made sense if I was looking. And I wonder, will I say, Gil, don't you come down? When did he stop looking at me? Tell me. Ew. Have you felt that too? Have you ever given your all for someone, and one day you realized that you were invisible to this person? That everything you were, everything you built, became the setting for a life where you were no longer a character. If you've experienced this, comment here for me. It is so now. He writes, I've lived it. It touched me, or it's true. He doesn't know the good it does to know that there is someone on the other side feeling what we feel inside. And the most painful. Do you know what it was? To have raised a child with so much love, and to see that love used against me. Because everything I had, everything I achieved, was done with him in mind. My future was to see Daniel well, and maybe, one day, hear him say, Mommy, thank you for everything. I thought that would be enough, but the world, my daughter, 9, the world changes when someone new enters the heart of those we love. In my case, that someone was called Emily, a beautiful, educated girl, with a magazine smile and an icy soul. And when she arrived, it was as if I had opened the doors of my house, of my heart, and let the wind in. Have you ever wondered if the love you gave too much ended up teaching someone not to value it? Because That's what happened to me. Nero Argenticam. And it is now that things begin to change. Because if you've seen me as a woman who has only suffered so far, wait until you know what came after Emily's arrival. Because what she did, it still gives me goosebumps. And it was there that everything began to fall apart. Want to know how? So get ready. Wow. Because what comes now hurts more than any silence I've ever endured. Emily first appeared on a Saturday afternoon, uh, with the sun beating lightly on the porch of my blue house. Daniel had warned me 2 days before. Mom, I want to introduce you to someone very special. I felt my heart beat differently, and I confess that I got excited. I prepared my best peach cobbler, set the table with my hand-embroidered tablecloth, the one I only used on special dates, and put fresh flowers in the kitchen jar. I wanted her to feel welcome. He wanted her to smell home. But when the door opened and I saw Emily for the first time, something inside me stuck. She wore a white blazer so starched it looked like it came out of a shop window. Her hair was impeccable. The perfume invaded the house even before she spoke. And the smile. Ah, that smile. Large, open, oh, but it didn't touch the eyes. It was like pretty paper wrapping an empty box. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, one of those that only touch the air. No. And in the first round of conversation, he blurted out, "Oh, what a cute little house." Well, vintage. Daniel chuckled nervously, but I kept quiet because I learned, Lou, over time, that the worst type of poison is the one that comes sweetened. During dinner, she looked at everything as if evaluating a property for sale. He commented on the color of the walls, asked if I still used that so retro stove, and when I tasted my pie, said, "Nokorin, and wow, it reminds me of my grandmother's food. Very rustic indeed." I kept smiling, serving, listening, yes, but every word of it was a small crack in the wall of what I thought would be a beautiful new chapter. That night, after they left, I washed the dishes by myself, as I always did, but it took me longer than usual. Not for the dishes, but because I was trying to figure out what exactly had hurt so much. And then it hit me. For the first time, I felt like an intruder inside my own home. The next day, Daniel called me excitedly, saying that Emily had loved it all. She said, "You're super authentic." Mom, authentic? No, I cannot. As if I were a museum piece. That word stuck in my throat for days. Emily came back again and again, each time with a new compliment that was, in fact, a hidden criticism. Mian Martin Ornstein, Hux, that crockery cup of yours is so nostalgic. Did you embroider this yourself? What a talent! My mother would never have time for that. It was as if each sentence of hers put me in the place of the past, as a souvenir of something that once was, but is no longer. And the worst is that Daniel did not understand. Well, not necessarily. toast now. He looked blind, me, unsail, delighted, and I, who raised that boy with such care, began to notice a subtle distance, as if Emily's presence was pushing mine to the corners. We always think we will recognize the danger when it enters. That will come like a hurricane, knocking it all down at once. But no, sometimes he comes in high heels, with a polite smile, complimenting his pie while ripping the soul out of his kitchen. And that's how it all started. Now, the most difficult thing, however, now, was not her arrival. That's what she did after she put both feet in my life. Do you have the courage to know how far a person can go to erase those who came before? Because what happened at the next dinner? It was there that her mask fell for the first time, and I was never the same again. The engagement was announced right here. In my backyard. Then the sound. On a warm spring afternoon. I had planted new daisies that week, and the smell of barbecue mixed with flowers was the stuff of a movie. Daniel hugged me tight and said, "Mom, I have a surprise." The surprise was Emily, with a golden ring and a rehearsed speech. So far, so good. My son's joy was mine too. The problem came the next second, when Emily took a folder with laminated sheets from her bag and began to distribute tasks, as if it were a company meeting. "I've thought about having brunch right here and now. It will be great. But, of course, let's change the layout a little. This heavy table doesn't match the light air we want." I stood there, with the dishcloth in my hand, watching my house become a backdrop. They didn't ask me for their opinion. Neither if I wanted to, nor if I could. They just decided. Emily ordered the menu to be changed. No homemade food. She would order finger foods. She exchanged my flowers for hers. She exchanged my silence for the feeling of being used. During the event, while everyone toasted, I washed the glasses in the sink so as not to cry in front of the guests. And when I returned, they had moved my picture frame from the shelf. They said it didn't match the color palette of the decor. That picture frame had the last photo I took with my husband before the accident. The last one. But for Emily, it was just an object out of place. Over the next few months, she began to visit me alone. He said he wanted to get more involved in the preparations, but it was always to show me something that was already decided. My mom said she's going to pay the most renowned florist in Lake Oswego. You'll see. It'll be wonderful. Mom thought it was better to have a cleaner dress. No old income. Something more sophisticated. We opted for a French buffet. More delicate. More current. And always with that sweet tone on the outside and cutting on the inside. Gradually, I realized that she came just to remind me of my place. I was the groom's mother, not the star. I was the past. Her mother was the present, beautiful, thin, modern, full of contacts. When Daniel came to tell me that the wedding was going to be in a country house rented by Beverly, Emily's mother, how dear Dananda, too, he said, "No, Mom, You're going to love the space. It looks like a magazine. I could only answer, Watcher did you? And will I have somewhere to sit? He didn't understand. I smiled to disguise it, but inside, how I unlicensed my heart was already beginning to close, like a flower, tired of pretending to bloom. I felt like a portrait hanging in a corner, which no one has the courage to throw away, but which also no longer fits the room. The last straw was when Emily told me, in a casual tone, "My mother will enter the ceremony with us. Okay? You come in later. With the guests. After. With the guests." That took me apart. But I remained silent. I continued, embroidering the cushions that she ordered herself, as if everything was fine. I continued cooking what she asked to freeze, saying that it would be useful for the day after the wedding. I kept erasing myself, so as not to ruin anything, because they taught me that a good mother doesn't get in the way. Only later did I understand that it wasn't love. It was fear of losing the little space I had left. And when the wedding came, that's when exclusion stopped being subtle. That's when she erased me for good. And divided you on what I should not harm. Want to know what it's like to be treated as a stranger at your own son's wedding? Then listen to what happened that day, because what they did to me, there are things that not even time erases. The photo shoot took place 2 days before the wedding. It was a beautiful place, with a renovated barn, surrounded by lavenders and white benches scattered around the field. Emily arrived with makeup, as if she were going to a magazine editorial, and her mother, Lady Widekin Huxilbow Beverly Maud, was already there, giving orders even to the photographers. I arrived early, as I always did in my life, in a light blue dress that I sewed with my own hands. Daniel hugged me quickly, with a tight smile. "Mom, you look beautiful." But soon Emily pulled him by the arm, saying that the photographer was waiting. They left me there, standing still. When they finally called me for a photo, I leaned next to Daniel and adjusted my posture. The photographer raised his camera, and just as I was about to click, I heard Emily's voice. "Mom, Daniel considered us. Oh, that's just with the family close to me." And then, like someone moving a chair in the room without thinking twice, she took me out of the frame with her hand, with delicacy, but firmly. I stood on my side, smiling on the outside, and on the inside, feeling the ground sink slowly. After that, I took a picture alone, with a bouquet that no one gave me. I took it from the corner, just so I didn't look out of place. At the prenuptial dinner, the situation worsened. The guest list was on a beautiful easel at the entrance, with golden calligraphy and hand-glued dried flowers. I looked up my name. Nothing. I took a closer look. Daniel Jones, chaperone, escort me at my own son's dinner. Wow. When I asked Emily discreetly, she let out a giggle. Oh, no, that was a ceremonial mistake. Super normal. It didn't seem like a mistake. It seemed like a choice. And that's when I started to understand. It was not a distraction. It was a thoughtful erasure, step by step, done with clean hands and a smile on his face. On the wedding day? No. I arrived early again. I took an extra change of clothes in case it rained, as I always did in all events in life. The receptionist led me to my table, number 18, and I stood next to two of the grooms, great uncles who didn't even know my name. I looked at the center of the room, Emily's mother, my old palm, all in gold. Yes, I'd say you passed a pew, sitting next to the bride and groom, smiling as if she were the one who had given birth to Daniel. And me, in the back, looking at everything from afar, as if watching a movie where he only recognizes the soundtrack. No one came to call me to speak, not even to dance, not for anything. I brought a handmade gift, an album with photos of Daniel since he was a baby, with notes that I wrote on each page myself. I left it discreetly on their desk at the end of the party. Whoa. I found the album lying next to the candy tray, with a glass of wine on top, the torn cloak in the corner. Yeah. And my handwriting blurred. That day, I didn't cry. No. I swallowed everything in silence, like someone who swallows vinegar by mistake and pretends it's water. But at night, alone in my room, I leaned my head against the pillow and felt the deepest pain a mother can feel, that of being forgotten on purpose, not by strangers, but for the one you carried in your arms. And there, in that bitter silence, I began to remember. Remembering every sleepless night, every skipped lunch, every gift I didn't buy for myself so I could give it to Daniel. I began to remember the woman I was, and the woman they were trying to erase. I'm here, opening my heart, telling this story like someone who bleeds into words. So, if you're listening, leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. It's not out of vanity. No. It's just that when we talk about pain like this, so exposed, knowing that there is someone on the other side feeling it together gives us the courage to continue. And I still have a lot to tell you. Do you think that was too much? So imagine when they came to ask me for something that I never imagined I would have to give. What would you do if you were asked to hand over the only thing that was still yours? Because that's when my soul started screaming. But still, no one listened. After the wedding, nod, Akshati, it was not long before Daniel called me, his voice different, hurriedly, as if she were carefully saying what she had already been rehearsing. Mom, we're thinking of buying an apartment, something closer to the center, but we are tight with the costs of the ceremony, the honeymoon. You know, I knew it, and before he even asked, I said, I said, son, tell me what you need. He hesitated, no, as if ashamed, mine too, and said, Um, Maybe a loan, temporary, just to make a down payment. Then we pay for everything. Right. I closed my eyes and said, yes. I didn't think twice. He was my boy. I took the documents of my second property, the one I had rented for years to a retired couple, and went to the bank with a heavy but firm heart. I took out a loan of $30,000, using the house as collateral. The manager even looked at me in amazement. Are you sure? They are newlyweds. How? I replied. I do. Hez, my son. Beronifar. Unchandigra. I signed each paper with trembling hands, but with faith. I returned home that day with a light soul. I thought that, finally, Noon would so optimistic interested. Now, yes, I would be part of their new life. With this gesture, I imagined open doors, lunches together. Oh, Leonard, how we shared Sundays. But that is not what happened. After the money, visits decreased. First, there were the commitments. Then, how? The invitations that did not arrive. I sent a message asking if they would come to dinner. Emily responded with a smiley emoji and said, we're adjusting to the new routine. And now that we have our home, we want a little space. That was the word. It was no longer distance. It was separation. One of those that you can't see with your eyes, but you can feel it in your gestures. I sat looking at the platter full of roast chicken and corn that I had prepared, just the way Daniel liked it. The food has cooled down. The heart, too. A few days later, I took a box with embroidered dish towels to give as a gift. When I arrived at the new apartment, Emily answered me at the door with a formal smile. Barbara, what a surprise. Come in, but quickly. Okay, we are on cleaning day. I went in. Anyway, I sat on the couch and saw that Daniel's graduation picture frame, the one that was on my sideboard, was now facing the wall. She picked up the box, thanked her with a kiss in the air, and said she loved these handmade things. But he left the box on top of the refrigerator, as if it were another object, worthless, waiting for the day of donation. That night, I sat on my couch and looked around. The photos on the wall, my flowery curtains, the worn carpets, all that was simple, nah. But it carried years of history, Mom. History that now seemed to no longer matter. And the worst thing is that I didn't know whether to cry for the distance or for the shame of having thought that money would buy respect, because that's what I started to feel. Shame. As if, by helping, I had lowered myself. As if my love had become a burden. And no one says that to us. But I'll tell you who are listening to me. There is pain that only a mother feels. That of giving everything and being returned with silence. I began to notice other things. When she called, Emily answered in a hurry. He said, "Hi, Barbara," with that tone of someone talking to a market attendant. On social media, he posted photos with the caption, "Building our own history." But in their story, The woman who carried the boy in her arms did not fit. It was not up to the mother who mortgaged her own roof so that they would have a place to live. It was as if my role had ended there, on the bank, in that signature. Wow. And even so, I kept smiling, smiling at those who no longer saw me. So, waiting for messages that didn't come, cooking food that was no longer served, because that's what we do when we love without conditions. But deep down, where we hide what we don't even know we feel, a question began to hit slowly. What if what they really want? Is it the rest? Do you think it's an exaggeration? Well, when the seekers comment, Harbisai, Tarsins, just listen to what happened when they came to ask me for something even bigger, something that wasn't just money. It was my story, my house, my ground, and this time I almost said no. Almost. But then I remembered who I was. That's what I promised myself years ago. And that's when everything starts to change. The surgery was simple, a routine thing, a hernia that had been bothering me for a long time. Daniel insisted, come stay with us for a few days. Mom, it's going to be good for you. I hesitated. I didn't want to bother, but he insisted so much, and deep down, now, part of me still believed that this could be a chance to reconnect. I prepared a small suitcase, took my medicines, a thick coat, and the book that I reread every time I missed it. When I arrived at their apartment, Emily had an exerted face. We did our best to make everything comfortable. I noticed that they had emptied the guest room. We put his bed there in the reading room. How? It's brighter. No, she said. The bed was an air mattress on the floor. For the first 2 days, I tried not to be a burden. I kept quiet. I made my tea alone, washed my mug, took my medicines without noise. But on the 3rd day, I noticed that Emily left early and purposely left the house in disarray. I started washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, and organizing the kitchen. I cooked a bean that Daniel liked since he was little. When he came home from work, she praised, "Wow, Mom, I arrived smelling like childhood." Emily wrinkled her nose. "The smell is too strong. It stays impregnated for days." The next day, I bought a new air freshener, so as not to bother me. The days turned into weeks. The recovery was over, but no one told me when I would leave. I started waking up before them, cleaning the bathroom, folding the towels, getting the coffee ready. I became an efficient shadow, a useful silence. Emily started leaving lists taped to the fridge. Buy plant-based milk, wash curtains, change sheets. One day, while setting the breakfast table, I saw a catalog open on top of the tablecloth. Golden Sunset Senior Residence with therapeutic activities and living space. My eyes fixed on the image of the lady smiling in a wheelchair. Emily walked past me and said, in that sweet voice that made me nauseous, "I was researching some nice places. I know that. You will. One day, you need it. At night, during dinner, with Daniel sitting right in front of me. She dropped the bombshell, as if talking about the weather forecast. Mom thinks it would be better for her health to live with people her age. Imagine, more and calm. There would be company, activities, everything adapted. Daniel choked, looked at her with surprise, but said nothing, not even yes, nor not. I just took a deep breath. I took another bite of the rice and smiled with my lips, but not with my eyes, because there I understood. They didn't want me to be better. They wanted me to be away. Wow. And the cruelest thing of all is that they didn't even try to disguise it anymore. Emily started to leave without warning, leaving the dishes for me. Daniel treated me with affection, but with the haste of someone who treats a plant that he forgot to water. No. One day, she handed me a new soap. No. It's more neutral. How? Its scent is too striking. It was my smell, the same since Daniel was born. Aye, the same one he recognized on the pillow when I traveled to visit my sister. Wow, the smell of my story. Wow. Now, it was uncomfortable, and I ask myself, how do we leave a place without physically leaving? Because that's what they were doing, withdrawing little by little, with small but pointed gestures, erasing myself from the inside out. There are people who say that hurt comes all at once, like a punch. But no, sometimes it comes drop by drop, until you are completely soaked and don't even remember what it was like to walk dry. And if you've been listening to me this far, stay with me a little longer. Because, look, I know it seems like you've seen the worst of this story, but trust me, what is yet to come will turn everything upside down. There are things that we only understand when it's too late. But in my case, I understood at the right time, because that's when they started messing with my papers, my accounts, my keys. What I knew, it was no longer about coexistence. It was about control. And then, honey, that's when the Barbara they thought they had forgotten began to wake up. Whoa. Do you have any idea what happens when an injured woman starts paying attention in silence? Because it's at that time that she learns to fight back. It was on a Tuesday, without any special date, that Daniel appeared with a brown leather briefcase. I was finishing folding some towels in the living room, still staying at their house, when he said, "Mom, do you have a minute? We wanted to talk." I felt a fine shiver down my spine, one of those that only comes when the soul already knows what the heart has not yet understood. Emily sat next to him, her face too calm, as if she already knew what was coming. Daniel began, "Well, we have been thinking about your future. Now, you have no one else but me. And, no, well, if something happens, everything will be easier if the properties are in my name. It's just to make it easier. Something of responsibility." The phrase, "if something happens," kept echoing in my head, like a poorly written sentence. He put the briefcase on the table and opened it. They were the papers from my house, from the 2 small apartments I bought with so much sacrifice, and even from the savings account, where I kept a little money for emergencies. Everything there, dream dry. Then I in a watch to adhere, with your stem, organized, without emotion. Emily added, We have already talked to a lawyer. Everything is very simple. You sign here, and we guarantee that everything will be safe. And, of course, you continue to live normally. I looked at my son's face. My boy, Antisium, and Mashankai, the same one who cried when I forgot to kiss goodnight, the same one who once wrote at school that when he grows up, he wants to take care of his mom as she takes care of him. And there he was, asking me for the keys to my life, with a coldness disguised as care. Signed, not out of trust, but because of tiredness, for fear of losing the little that still made me feel like a mother. When none so another, I thought that if I said no, he would walk away for good, that if he resisted, the last door would close. So I sighed, and when the pen scratched the paper, I felt as if I was erasing my own name from the history I had written with blood. Work and silence. In the following days, nothing changed. Emily started to answer the rent things by email. One of the tenants called me asking about the maintenance of the sink, and I had to say, now my daughter-in-law is the one who solves this. I felt myself shrink inside. Days later, no, I've seen a chocolate. Daniel came up to me with another uncomfortable smile. Mom, we are thinking of renovating your apartment. That old structure can be dangerous. In the meantime, maybe you'll stay somewhere more appropriate. Appropriate. I understood right away. It was an eviction with beautiful words. They gave me a month to leave. I was handed the keys to a tiny studio on the east side of town, a noisy neighborhood, where I didn't know anyone. When I got there, with my boxes and my heart tightened, I saw that my old closet didn't even fit. It was a cold space, with the smell of fresh paint, without any photograph on the wall. I sat on the single mattress and leaned my head against my knee, trying to understand where I got lost. And the answer came raw. In love. It was out of love that I gave everything. And it was that same love that pushed me out. No, there's a moment in life when we realize that we have given too much. That he loved for two, who gave so much that, when he looks back, he no longer finds his own footprints. I found myself there, in that cramped bed, with empty hands and my chest full of absence. And you, who are listening to me, have you ever felt that? Have you ever found yourself erasing your own history just to keep someone close? If yes, comment here for me. Right? I know how it is. I understand you. It's true, because when we recognize the pain of the other, it weighs less. There were weeks without visits, no connections, as if I had finally been put in the place they wanted. Out of the way. I talked to the walls. He made coffee for a solitude that already seemed like a fixed guest. And in this loneliness, something began to change. I stopped waiting. I began to remember. who I was before them. And it was there, comme there, in this empty studio, that the woman they tried to erase began to breathe again. Because what they didn't know, it's just that still had the right words saved. And when I said the you, wow, cartoonish there, and when I said them, nothing would ever be the same as before. Can you imagine what a simple caption can provoke? So, wait. Because it was in a cell phone click that everything started to turn. At first, I cried in the morning, so, sitting on the edge of the bed, with the coffee already cold in the mug. There were days when I didn't even turn on the light. I would stand there. I would stand there in the dark, listening to the noise of the street coming in through the poorly sealed window of the studio. It was as if I was invisible to the world. I got into the habit of looking at old photos, Daniel's letters, when he was little. There was one in which he said, "Oh, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to buy a house just for you, with blue windows, just like ours." Funny. Well, he bought it. Yes, but he just forgot to let me in. I spent nights awake, wondering where I failed. At what point did loving become discarded? What did I am to wonder? One discarded. When it was that taking care became a burden. But after so much hurting myself trying to understand, one thing began to change. It wasn't suddenly. No, it was gradually. One day, I stopped crying. The next, I started writing. Write down dates, speeches, attitudes. I kept the bank receipts. I printed the emails. I started to pay attention to things that I used to miss. The silent old woman they thought they had forgotten. I was starting to wake up. And there's a silence that is no longer sadness. It's analysis, observation. I wrote everything down in a little notebook with a red cover that was kept between the towels. I started to remember the phrases of manipulations, the way they put the properties in Daniel's name, and how, strangely, it was Emily who managed everything. I remembered the day she offered me that neutral soap, and how each small gesture was actually part of something bigger. I realized that nothing was by chance, that every compliment came with venom, that each invitation was a polite trap. I began to understand that I was not only forgotten, I was discarded with method, with refinement, and that, for me, was the last straw. One night, I opened an old box where I kept letters from the church. Among them, I found a card from Mitchell Harris, a retired lawyer, a good man with firm faith and slow hands, who sang with me in the St. James Community Choir. Mitchell was always one of those who listened more than they talked, a man of silent justice. Like me, I picked up the phone and called. His voice was still the same. Paused, welcoming. Barbara Jones. How long? I said, Mitchell, let's talk to one to be sure. I need to talk. But it's personal, he replied only. Oh, please, Carton. You know where to find me. And I knew, in that instant, that something inside me was coming back into place. The following Sunday, no, I went to his little white house at the back of the Arbor Lodge neighborhood. I took apple pie, Neil went. One signature deception. Like in the old days, we sat at the balcony table. No, how? And I started to count. No rush, no drama, only with the firmness of someone who spent too much time being silenced. I told him about the properties, the papers, the studio. I spoke of the catalog of the nursing home, from the overturned picture frame. Mitchell looked me in the eye and didn't say, "I'm sorry." He said, "You still have power. You just need to remember how to use it." And he asked me for all the documents. Don't make decisions now. Just watch and trust the time. On the way home, for the first time in months, I felt the wind hit my face in a different way, as if life was giving me back a forgotten piece of myself. The Barbara who walked fast, who solved things, who faced a bank queue and even cooked for 3 neighbors. She wasn't dead. It was just asleep. Moo. And I know that those who see it from the outside may think, but why all this now? It's over. You shall. Never mind. But listen to what I'm going to tell you. It's not about revenge. It's about memory, about dignity, about putting the names in the right places before the story is told by those who never knew what it was to love in silence, because they thought they had won, that I was going to stay in the studio until the end. But little did they know that the game was just beginning, and it was at that time that what turned everything upside down happened. The photo, the legend, the click that planted the seed of my turnaround. Have you ever imagined that a single image can destroy years of pretense? Well, then get ready, because it was on any given Sunday that I looked at my cell phone and saw it. And there, bowed by, at that moment, no. My answer was born, new, in 2 words, and it was with them that everything began to fall apart. It was a Sunday like so many others. I woke up early, put on my blue wool sweater, tied my scarf around my neck, and went to morning mass at St. James Church. I hadn't shown up for weeks. I entered in silence. That in the back, near the side door, where I always sat when I wanted to observe more than participate. The choir sang quietly, and the pastor, a young but firm-spoken man, came into the pulpit with a worn-out Bible in his hands. And it was there, in the middle of the sermon. Joe, that, he said, time is the advocate of those who have been just. It went through me like a tame blade. I stood there, standing there, not done while, but I soon was Sukai. With this phrase beating inside my chest like an old drum. Time, not I, who spent my life waiting, silencing, how, accepting, could time, after all, be on my side. For the first time in a long time, I left the church with my back straight, Something inside me had straightened out as well. That same day, I knocked on Mitchell's door. Leone, wow. He greeted me with a smile and a look that mixed compassion with respect. I took all the papers I had kept in a folder: contracts, emails, printed messages, receipts. And I also took my little red notebook with notes of every sentence Emily had said, of every little act of contempt. Mitchell picked it all up with slow hands, read it quietly for a while, and then looked at me. Barbara, this is not just a story of heartache. That's one case. I took a deep breath. I don't want confusion. Mitchell, Neto. I don't want scandal. But I'm also not going to pretend that nothing happened. He began to review the documents. He found serious flaws. The contract for the transfer of the real estate did not have two valid witnesses, as required by Oregon law. There was no cooling off period before the signing. And, most importantly, he noticed clear marks of emotional duress. They used the effective bond to extract from you something they would never have been able to do otherwise. This has a name, and it has consequences. His words were like a warm blanket over my wounded soul. For the first time, someone looked at me not as a weak old woman, but as someone who was right. That's it, my son. This cures more than any medicine. In the following days, I organized everything. I started recording the calls. I used my old phone, which still worked fine. Every time Emily spoke with sarcasm, I wrote it down. Every time Daniel didn't talk, I wrote every sentence, every gesture, every silence. Everything became part of my dossier. There was no anger in my actions. There was precision. I stopped being the woman who cried over cold coffee. I became the woman who wrote down what no one wanted to be remembered. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. Well, this makes more difference than you think, because when we share a pain, it becomes a bridge, not a wall. Mitchell told me something I've never forgotten. Real justice doesn't have to be loud. It is made in the silence of the right choices. And it was in this silence that I began to build my plan, not to punish, but to return the truth to its place, because there are people who build empires on lies. But one day, the base gives way, hell, and when it gives in, everything falls apart. And do you think they noticed? Not by a long shot. Emily also posted photos smiling. So cold. As if the world was a stage and she was the main star. Daniel was still trapped in that domestic illusion, not noticing that the house where they lived was built on the rubble of my sacrifice. But that was going to change. And it was going to change quickly, because a notification on the cell phone was about to expose everything. A photo, a legend, wow, an oversight. It's amazing how sometimes the truth doesn't need to be sought. It offers itself, and when it came like a sharp knife, prepared to see what they did to me with my own hands, on the couch I paid for. So, hold on. because the fall started with a click. I knew that to face that. A wounded heart was not enough. Strategy was needed. Mitchell made it very clear. It's an undeniable at Barb. Now is the time to act with your head, not with emotion. And I listened, went home, with the same discipline with which I spent my life sewing, embroidering, Weinerstadt, raising my house, brick by brick. I began to assemble my own patchwork of justice. One piece a day. No rush, no noise. First, I organized the emails. I had them all filed. Cow. From the first messages of Emily talking about the renovation in my apartment to those in which she used two sweet words. As someone who disguises poison with honey. Then I went to the bank statements. I noticed strange movements in one of the joint accounts I had with Daniel. An account that, by the way, he didn't even remember that it still existed. I made copies, kept them in envelopes, wrote the dates in pencil. No, very small. Nersig so iron. One dear Seta. In the corner of each one. Wow. Mitchell taught me. We are what was it? All. Each line of these is a memory that the paper does not forget. Gradually, I collected more. In time, I started recording the calls Emily made with her mother, Mrs. Howgill, Beverly, Wide. It was always in the late afternoon, when I thought no one was listening. Us. Mom, we need to find a way to free Daniel. He still has that Catholic guilt with his mother. That slows everything down. I heard that and felt a sting, not anger, of warning. She didn't see me as part of the family. She saw me as an obstacle, and obstacles, for her, had to be removed. I kept the audio with the name of Tard. And Keith's tea, and hid the pen drive inside a jar of flour on the top shelf of the kitchen. I learned from life that the most obvious places are the least touched. I also called Daniel on random days. He asked if he needed cake, if he wanted help with taxes, if he needed me to pray for him. My voice was the same. Sweet. Tame. Firm. Hey. On the outside, on this, human or no, I remained a devoted mother. How? Inside. Do I'm not what you got. Why see silk sound? I was a hurricane, and the more I listened, the more clarity I gained. Mitchell, in turn, contacted a retired accountant who had worked for years in the Caldwell family's chain of salons. It only took 3 meetings and a few cross-checks to discover that Emily had used my properties as collateral for a personal loan. Not for Daniel. For her construction of a new facility in Lake Oswego. The paper read, her signature was there, and the address of the property used as collateral. It was mine. The one I bought with 3 shifts of work and sleepless nights. She took my sweat and turned it into credit to grow on her own, without saying a word to me. How? Without even asking me. Wow. It's hard to explain what I felt at that moment. It wasn't just pain. It was a revelation, a brutal clarity. I saw, had a moment, before. with my own eyes. The portrait of ingratitude stamped on a bank contract. And it is at these times that we understand. Evil is not always noisy. Sometimes he comes in at high heels, with manicured nails and a rehearsed smile. And that's why you're listening to me. Stay here with me until the end, because what I found out after that changes everything. I thought I had seen the worst, but the worst was still hidden in a caption on a sofa and in a detail that no one noticed, except me. Even so, I continued to act as always. I sent a cake for Christmas. I sent a card on Emily's birthday. I called on the day Daniel was promoted. I spoke softly, as if I didn't know anything. But each gesture of mine was a stitch on the quilt I was sewing, a quilt made of evidence, silence, and justice. And when it was ready, it would cover not only my pain, but all the lies they tried to hide under the rug. And do you think they noticed? Of course not. They thought I was quiet because I had given up. They thought that old people settle. But there's one thing I've learned. Not sure. When an old woman starts writing, it is not daily. How? It is a testimony. Wow. And there is a page, precisely one, that has become the beginning of the end for them. Because it was on a Sunday afternoon, with the smell of pie in the air and the sun hitting my lap, that I opened my cell phone and saw it. Now, the legend, the sofa, and I did capitalization, when I came out to bed of you. And, finally, the phrase that made me get up from my chair with a calm heart and a ready answer. Want to know what I read? And what did I say afterwards? So, it is, because that part, it's never to be forgotten. It was on a clear Friday, one of those when the air seems lighter. That I decided to accept Daniel's invitation for lunch. Emily wasn't present when I arrived, or at least hadn't shown up yet. The house was all set up. Later, lasted and unlimited the duet pictures, knelling of artificial lavender and expensive silence. I brought a fresh cornbread, wrapped in white cloth embroidered with my name, the same one my grandmother used to keep what she made with affection. Can you set the table? Mom, he said. Already opening the notebook on the countertop. What do you say? What say? And I went, in silence, as I always did. I took the plates, folded the napkins with the corner facing up, an old custom of mine, and adjusted the cutlery. That's when I heard the sound of a glass clinking, a muffled sound, and he sat down, coming from the back porch. The door was just leaning against it. And then, the voice, clear and known, firm, thin, cold. It was Emily. As soon as this transfer is secured, none, one a bit and so, I will get divorced. Me. Half of the inheritance will be mine. This old woman thinks it will last forever. Followed by a laugh. Me. A laugh that chilled my blood. And then, how? The sound of another glass beating, as if they were celebrating. No, as if I were just an obstacle overcome. My fingers squeezed the plate so hard that I felt it bite under my palm. But I didn't move. I didn't get in. I didn't cry. I took the cell phone out of my pocket, slowly, pressed the record button, and I let the truth reveal itself in her own voice. I went back to the table. Ourselves, awa, put the cracked plate face down. Daniel didn't even notice. And at that lunch, I ate slowly, so as if swallowing not only the food, but the pain and the confirmation. I finished my tea, thanked him, and left with a light kiss on his cheek, a kiss that he may never receive in the same way again. I got home, sat on my narrow couch, and played the audio. 1, 1, 2, Hanananigo. 10 times. The same sentence. The same tone. No, I'd watched you out. The same contempt. And after the last play, I left the cell phone on my lap and closed my eyes. I stayed there for hours, like someone who buries someone who has never died. And the truth is this. There. I buried the last part of me that I still believed I was loved by them. Funny how some memories stick to us more strongly than any photograph. The smell of the soap I used to wash his clothes. The laughter when he received a Christmas present. And now, that voice, that sentence, that sound of a cup breaking my story. And you, who are there listening to me, tell me, do you also have a memory like that? The kind that, when they return, come in one piece? Share it with me in the comments. Sometimes, just by writing, we lighten the weight. The next day, I went to Mitchell with my cell phone in my hand. I showed everything. He listened without interrupting. When he finished, he took off his glasses, closed his eyes, and said with a calmness that gave me chills, "Now, she has dug her own end." Wow. And I understood. I understood that it was no longer about me. It was about something bigger, about the moral of things, about what is fair, about what you don't do with those who gave you a roof, food, and name. And there, at that moment, I decided that my justice would not be with scandal, nor with shouting. She would be like me, precise, silent, unexpected, because the worst pain is the one that comes when you think you've won, and the best answer is the one that no one sees coming. But do you think it stops there? What was just this recording? Well, it wasn't. The real fall began days later, with simple Instagram post, a legend, a sofa, and 2 words that changed everything. Want to know what they were? So follow me, because the next click was the most accurate of my life. When the invitation came, I knew it wasn't because I miss it. It was by appearance. Emily sent a polite message with emojis and forced exclamations. Dinner here at home on Saturday. Family together again. What a delight. I read it and felt the bitter taste of the staging. But I accepted because those who observe in silence also know the right time to enter the scene. I chose my navy blue linen dress, the same one I wore at Daniel's christening. I tied my hair in a low bun and took a fresh banana bread, made with my mother's recipe. When I arrived, the door was already ajar, and the ambient music played some instrumental melody. Everything carefully assembled to look perfect. The table was set with silver cutlery, monogrammed cloth, napkins, candles lit in glass chandeliers. Emily wore a tight beige dress and pearl necklace. She looked like something out of a magazine commercial. Daniel, now to journal, distracted, journal, came to hug me with the same automatic affection as always, without noticing the tension that hung in the air. Mom, am glad you came. No, of course I came. My son. That's what family is for, isn't it? I replied, in the sweetest tone I could find inside me. Sit. Emily made sure to pour the most expensive wine. Looking me in the eyes, it's a French red. Barbara, I hope your palate is used to it. Smile. After so many years of drinking bitter coffee. And you are quite you. Dear, anything surprises me. She laughed with the others, but the twinge in her eye told me that the blow was felt, and it was just the beginning. The dinner continued with conversations about investments, trips, and the couple's new phase. Emily spoke as if I were a decorative piece of the house. Daniel and I are thinking of doing a renovation. We want something more modern. The old houses are charming, but you know how it is, right? Young. Everything gets old. She looked at me with a venomous half smile, expecting some reaction. I just deposited my fork gently on the plate and said, Honey, dear now, time teaches those who know how to wait, and aging, for some, is a privilege, for others, a mirror. My turn now. More cities, thermos down. The silence that followed was louder than any answer. Daniel pretended not to hear, but the wine no longer descended so lightly. I watched them both, Emily forcing laughter, her eyes running around the room. Restless, Daniel is increasingly silent, as if he senses the crack, but still doesn't want to look straight ahead. I knew that there. So clear. That night, I was not the visitor. I was the reminder of what they tried to hide. And on that table, where everything seemed perfect, I left my first movement, disguised, soft, silent, now. At the end of dinner, wow, so many would talk about what I so. I thanked him with my usual calmness. The food was great. The company, even better. I stood up elegantly and took out of my bag a cream envelope, sealed carefully. No, not. All now except Emily knew how. I left a little gift on the table. Then you open it. She took the envelope without giving it importance. She smiled out of obligation. Oh, thank you. How kind. I smiled back. Sometimes what comes in an envelope, changes everything. In that envelope were copies of the bank statements. Those who showed the misuse of my properties as collateral for loans for private businesses. There were also screenshots of messages where Emily openly discussed her intentions with her mother. No charges, no threat, just facts, dates, figures, the tip of the iceberg appearing, the first crack of light entering the castle of lies. I left that house with a firm heart. The high moon followed my steps to the car. I drove slowly, with my hands on the wheel, as if holding not only the path, but the destination itself. And there, as I passed the bridge over the Willamette River, I knew the deck had turned, but the game, it was just beginning. And you want to know what she did when she opened the envelope? Do you want to know what her reaction was? And Daniel? Because the next morning, it brought a call that I had been waiting for years. A call that began with a trembling voice and ended with a request that made me smile alone. Looking out the window, want to know what he said? So stay with me, because now I'm not judged. I sound so cocked in. It's time for the truth to come out. The call came at 7. I'm 12 A. And then the next morning, known number, calculation banam, dishinashause. But the voice cracked. It was Daniel. No. Mom, Emily is freaking out. We received some documents, some papers. I don't understand anything. I sat on the edge of the bed with the phone to my ear and my heart at peace. Calm down, Lily. Son, it must be just life. Reorganizing? On the other side, silence. I could imagine his expression, lost in the middle of a gale that he himself allowed to enter. What you out to? But that was just the breeze. The storm itself had been building quietly for months. Mitchell and his team had filed the lawsuit 2 days earlier. They alleged emotional coercion, patrimonial fraud, and abuse of trust, all based on the evidence I gathered. The history, what in term, what harm, she can't time. The recordings, the poorly drafted contracts, one by one, I'll city to out. The dots were precisely connected. The judge in charge granted a how under secrecy. Then temporary suspension of the property titles. The properties were frozen, and the bank accounts, the ones Emily moved without thinking too. No withdrawal. No withdrawal. No transfer. No new deed could be recorded. It was like pulling the rug, but without anyone seeing my hand moving. That morning, while she was still posting photos with captions such as "Life smiles on those who have courage," the first domino fell at the real estate registry office. An employee received the judicial notification and, with the court seal in hand, typed it into the system. Property under analysis, unavailable for transaction. Shortly after noon, it was the bank's turn. Mitchell personally contacted the manager of the joint account between Daniel and Emily. The balance was blocked, and then the accountant, the one who had done Emily's creative bookkeeping, received a subpoena to produce the statements for the past 5 years. Everything timed, everything prepared for it to fall at once. And when everything falls at the same time, there is no time to lift anything. Meanwhile, I followed my usual rhythm. I prepared my coffee at 6 in the morning, as I have done since I can remember. Toast with peach jam, newspaper folded on the table, a soft radio playing those songs that no one else hears. Then, my walk around the block. I greeted Mr. Mr. Higgins. Now, okay, what you got see on? Who always waters the daisies with a crooked hose, and Mrs. Ruth Well-known, who leaves food for the cats on the street. No one imagined that. Behind my meek step, there was a decision that would change everything. Not even I imagined that I would be able to turn my story around like that. But I went. In the evening, as always, I sat in the armchair with my cup of chamomile and said my prayer. I thanked Liram in a low voice for still being here, for having the strength to fight my way. And I asked for only one thing: serenity. Went on, because what was to come, it was greater than any humiliation they had ever put me through. It was the whole truth coming back into its place, and, perhaps, a chance to look in the mirror and recognize myself again. Emily didn't know everything yet. I thought there was time to maneuver, that all it took was a smile, an emotional blackmail, a turnaround. But what she didn't understand is that when a woman is humiliated to the bone, what is born afterwards is not weakness. It's root wound. And I had already planted mine. The next day, she would receive the last notification, the one that would dismantle the house of cards. A notification that did not come with shouts, nor with scandals. It came with the stamp of justice. A case number 1. The signature of someone who knows the law. And the truth? Want to know what she did when she received it? How did Daniel react when he discovered that nothing else was in his name? And, above all, what did I say when she tried to confront me? So it is, because the silence that comes now will begin. It will speak louder than anything. That morning, the coffee was stronger than usual. Maybe it was me trying to keep my heart steady. It was already customary to wake up early, sit in the same corner of the table with the newspaper, and look out the window at the world that went on without me. Or at least, that's what they thought. The cell phone vibrated with a notification from the group of ladies of the church. Barb, did you see Emily's post? Clicked, and there it was. The photo? Emily, Mr. Howard's tomb, accomplished. At nothing job. Sitting on my couch, the couch I bought when Daniel entered college, with her legs crossed, smiling next to Beverly. What? How? Her mother, Daniel, in the background. Ah, among them. How? With a vacant gaze. The caption, why no, the family, that really matters. For a second, my hands froze. My heart stopped in a dry beat. Then came that twinge in the stomach, which was no longer new, but something inside me, this time, now, did not bleed. It was different. That sentence didn't hurt me. She confirmed it to me. It confirmed that everything I feared, everything I suspected, everything I swallowed quietly for years, was there. No, me was there. Now, now, heirs to the world. And it was precisely for this reason that I didn't cry. I just smiled. Well, I pulled out my phone, opened the comments, and wrote, "Good luck." 2 words. 2 words that, for those who read without context, seem kind, well, but for those who lived what I lived, were the warning. They were the sign. Because I knew what would come next. And it didn't take long. Nose calmed down. Mitchell was already prepared. My confirmation was enough for the papers to follow the flow. In less than an hour, the accounts were officially frozen. The titles of the properties temporarily reversed, based on the injunction accepted by the judge. Simultaneous notifications left his office bound for the bank, the city hall, Nadir Whitetown, the accountant, no, Emily's company, well, and even the lawyer they had used for the first contract. One domino after another, all falling at the same time. I do, a double idea. In silence, but with a rumble in the heart of those who thought they were in control. And that's when the phone rang. This time, I knew it wasn't just a call. It was the reflection of the impact. It was the fall beginning. I answered calmly. Miss when she probably I answered. Mom, for God's sake, what's going on? It was Daniel. His voice trembled. Nervous, not understanding anything. The bank called me. They said we no longer have access to the account. The lawyer called, saying that the properties were blocked. What have you done? Mom? I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I looked at my cup of coffee and tasted it sweet. I did what I should have done a long time ago. My son, I protected what is mine. He was silent, and I did, because in that pause, he felt the weight of everything he ignored, and I felt the lightness of those who, finally, stood up. You couldn't do it without warning, he shouted. You also didn't warn me when you signed the things behind my trust. I replied, now we're even. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. If this story is touching you, it helps me spread it. Like this video and subscribe here to the channel. It may seem simple. Now, we're not doing simple, but it makes more difference than you think. That afternoon, Emily tried to contact her. 3 missed calls. None of them were answered. A message on the cell phone. JZ. On the contact house and shell, Sayers. Can we talk? I read it and deleted it, because sometimes silence responds better than any words. And when the mask falls, no more confrontation. Just a mirror. But do you think she accepted the fall quietly? No. What she did the next day, left even Mitchell surprised. And what did Daniel find out about her? Made his world fall apart. Want to know what came to light? So stay, because now, the truth will shine through. Daniel appeared at the gate as if the ground had collapsed under his feet. He hit hard, calling my name as if begging for air. I opened the door slowly, with the calm that only time teaches. He entered with wide eyes, stiff steps, his heart on edge. Behind him, Bihua, Emily, trying to keep her composure, but already with a tense face, as if she knew that that day she would not have makeup to disguise it. They sat in my small room, the same one that has been the scene of so many Christmases. Laughter and silly birthday cakes, but now, pound zero. Only silence reigned there. Why did you do that, Mom? He asked, without disguising his pain. They froze everything. The lawyer said that the properties returned to his name. Did you go after justice hidden from me? I didn't respond right away. I just took the blue folder that was in the closet, sat in the usual armchair, and put it on my lap. Everything you need to know is in here. Daniel, I delivered carefully. He took the briefcase as if receiving a sentence, opened, and time stopped. The leaves made a noise as he turned them one by one. Receipts, doctored contracts, screenshots of Emily's messages with her mother, transcribed recordings with dates and times. In the middle of reading, Emily stood up, nervously, trying to take the papers out of his hand. This is an invasion of privacy. She set me up. She is trying to destroy us. Daniel, he held on tight. Let me read it. And he read it. The entire room seemed suspended in mid-air. Each sentence was a new wound. And then, he got to the audio. The transcript was there, but I knew that the words gained another weight when listened to. I turned on the little tape recorder. Now, her voice filled the room. Now, as soon as this transfer is secured, I will get divorced. Half of the inheritance will be mine. This old woman thinks it will last forever. Then laughter. Then that wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty. Daniel lowered his gaze. It turned white. His hands trembled. Emily, now my batteries to pound. Emily wept, passed by. Desperate. Lan tried to justify herself. It was a joke. You know how we talk trash sometimes. But he did not answer. Well, he just took a deep breath and said, in a thin voice, "We have. You destroyed everything." She backed off. "This old lady is destroying our lives?" He shouted, but well, pointing at me with hatred. I continued to sit, firm, my station on, with my hands on my lap. No, me, Emily, Mom, he said, staring her in the face. You destroyed it yourself. You know, there is a moment in life when the weight of the truth is lighter than the lie that we have carried for so long. And to see my son there, one time, untented, so boldly sit, facing his own mistake, it didn't give me pleasure. It gave me peace, because for a moment, Billy, he saw me again. Not as a burden, not as a nuisance, but like the mother who is always there, even when it was forgotten. And if you've been following this far, I need to tell you, what is yet to come is more than justice. It is reparation. No, because what life took from me in silence will now be returned in dignity. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of something from your life or someone you love, stay with me, because when Mitchell walked through the door with the bailiff, everything changed. Want to know what happened? So don't get out of there. This is down. Because the scene that follows, no one in my family ever forgot it. Mitchell walked in with the same serenity with which he conducted the whole process. Light suit, briefcase under his arm, steady gaze. Behind him, the bailiff, with documents in hand and the duty to deliver more than papers. The truth. The line is sailing out to town. I see so. Emily widened her eyes, trying to understand. This is persecution. I have rights. The officer, and, without responding, only extended the summons. Immediate blocking of assets would realm the word. Audit of bank transactions and formal citation of the criminal investigation. The judge had determined priority in the case. It was just the beginning. In the days that followed, everything came to light. The loans that Emily made in the name of the family, using the properties that never belonged to her. The documents falsified with the help of his mother, Beverly Caldwell. The financial favors in the company's contracts of luxury salons. The local press found out, and when the scandal hit social media, why, the fall was public. Loyal customers turned away. Investors broke agreements. The Caldwell's luxury facade collapsed from the inside out, and what was once ostentation, it turned into shame. Beverly tried to defend herself, saying that it was all exaggeration, but the emails spoke for themselves. The recordings, too, and justice, even if it takes time, is necessary. The mansion in Lake Oswego was put up for sale in a hurry, but with the assets frozen, no contract was closed. Emily and I, in turn, was evicted from the apartment where she lived with Daniel. He tried to claim that he was being victimized, but the evidence was irrefutable. His name has become synonymous with greed. In the church, no one spoke to her anymore. In the neighborhood, it has turned into shadow, and the eyes that once envied her now ignored her. Old Barbara wasn't weak. She was patient. That's what I heard from a lady in the market. While I was choosing potatoes, I smiled inside, because it wasn't revenge that I sought. It was repair. Returning to my home was like breathing after a long time underwater. The windows were dusty, the garden dry, but I was there, on my floor, near den sun, on my sofa, on my walls, with my photos back on the shelves. And the first thing I did that day was to open the balcony closet and take my grandmother's saved seeds. I planted roses, daisies, and carnations, each flower, then a reminder of what I endured. Each color, a piece of the pain that I became root. Daniel did not leave that day. He sat in the kitchen chair, his eyes empty. Mom, I made a mistake. I didn't say yes. Not even that it doesn't. I just put a cup of tea in front of him and whispered, "Now you know." Because some lessons we don't give with words, he gives with absence, and others firmly. Now, hearts, he cried, "Whoa, not by me, for him, for the years wasted, wow, for the blindness he chose." And I let him cry. It was necessary. Do you believe that there are people who only see when everything breaks? Well, that's how it was. And the break, it wasn't over yet, because what happened in court on the day of the final hearing, it was the real outcome. Do you want to know what I said in front of the judge? And what happened to everything that was mine? So follow me, because the last page of this story, it is yet to be turned. Wow, Almighty you. He came back on a cloudy afternoon, like those that cover Portland with a humid silence, which seems to enter through one's bones. He was thin, his face haggard, no, his beard unkempt. He knocked on my door without courage, with his hesitant hand and his eyes downcast, like a boy who knows he has broken his mother's dearest toy. "Open." Oh, he said nothing. I just took one step to the side. Whoa. He went in. How? He sat in that chair that was always his, at the end of the table. Matsui Mab. The same one where, now, as a child, he would swing his legs and ask for more apple juice. Now, his legs were motionless, and the juice, it was just memory. Mom. His voice came low, almost failing. I was blind. She turned me against you. And I did. Wow. I left because it was easier to believe her than to admit that I was leaving you aside. He looked at me, waiting for some reaction, but I stood there, as I had so many times when he was still a child, waiting for him to say what he needed to say himself. You were everything, Mom, and I forgot. And you, forgive me? I sat in front of him. I held his hand. It was not a theatrical gesture. He was firm and serene. You were my boy, Daniel. I loved you with everything I had, even when you didn't see it. But sometimes love needs to let the other fall. No, it's the only way to learn to lift with your own legs. He cried, "I don't need to when we see cow. Not might the circle doctor." Silently, as someone who finally understands what once hurt without a name. And I cried inside, but I didn't let a tear fall, because my heart, at that moment, was no longer one of pain. It was peaceful, a peace that cost dearly, but that finally has arrived. I invited him to dinner on Sunday, like in the old days. I cooked roast chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes, and peach cobbler. The table was simple. Fine John, honey simple, made of old wood. And on the second, our disintegrities theory. with the marks of the years and the scratches of cutlery that came from decades ago. We both sat down. Ooh, no rush, no excuses, just looks and forkfuls. There were no speeches, but there was reconciliation. And between one silence and another, I realized that the scar will always be there, but it no longer throbs. It just reminds me that I survived. I went back to singing in the church choir. I wouldn't have called you out. His voice still trembled a little at first, but little by little he was firming up, as if he were rediscovering his own soul. No. The ladies of the neighborhood welcomed me with tight hugs, as if understanding that some victories are not shouted out, they are lived. And my laugh, and the one that many said was too discreet. It appeared again among the leaves of the garden, replanted. Oh, by the way, now full of daisies, because the beauty of life is in flourishing, even after they have tried to uproot it. I didn't have to tell my story to everyone. I didn't have to take revenge with shouts, or humiliate anyone in the public square, because the truth, when it is silent, echoes deeper. And justice, when it comes calmly, it tastes like eternity. The world may never know how much I cried, knew how much I was left aside. Oh, how much I begged in prayer for my son to open his eyes. But God knows. That's it. It's enough. Why? But if you think it all ended there, you're wrong. Because before I wrap up this story, I still have something to reveal. Something that no one, not even Daniel, imagined. Oh, want to know what it is? So get ready. So, because the ending, it's quieter than you expect and stronger than you think. Today, my house smells like baking cake and the sound of birds in the windows. The garden blooms as if it had never known winter. Daisies, hydrangeas, lavenders, everything I planted with the hands that one day signed papers of loss, now reaps beauty in every corner. Daniel comes on Sundays. He brings bread, mows the lawn, knees, and from time to time just sits there with me, saying nothing. We learned to love in silence. After so much noise, Emily and Beverly have disappeared from town. I heard that the salons closed, that they moved to another state. I don't feel anger, nor do I wish harm. When it is so taught, life has already taken care of what needed to be done. And today, when I look at everything I have regained, I understand. Justice is not revenge. It's balance. That's when the world turns slowly. And even so, it puts everything in place. One of these mornings, I wrote in my diary, I was good, I was forgotten, but now I am free. And to be free, my dear, is to sleep without tightness in the chest. It's knowing that, even without raising your voice, you won. Because if there's one thing this story has taught me, it's that time doesn't fail. He doesn't need to scream. He observes, waits, and acts. And when it arrives, it brings with it the weight of the choices that each one has made. Mine was to love, I then resist, and finally let time do justice. Sometimes a woman's greatest strength is precisely not to return in kind. It is to build in silence, while others destroy in the noise. And that strength, that of standing when everyone expected you to fall, is what I carry with me to the last white hair. If you've stayed with me so far, nor I want to tell you one thing. Thank you. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for sharing this piece of life with me. There are stories that we carry quietly for years, until we find someone willing to listen with our hearts. If this story touched your chest in any way, give me this hug in the form of a like. It warms up the channel and gives me the courage to keep telling. And if you want to come back for a coffee with me in the next stories, sign up here. You will always be welcome. See? Tell me in the comments of which city are you listening to me. I love to know where this voice is coming from. And it activates the bell, because that way you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.